Hello guys, SharpWind here. Remember that super important tutorial that I was talking about? That's today. Now you may have seen the title and said that's clickbait. But no, I am 100% serious when I tell you that this is by far the most important tutorial that you will ever see. About animation and filmmaking, that is. The knowledge I'm about to give off in this video is professional matter being used by directors on actual movie sets. This is a top league. Now I hope you're ready, because today we're talking about the camera language. Now as far as I'm concerned, cameras don't talk. What is the camera language? Why is it so important? And what makes it the secret of making all of those professional animations and movies professional? Today we're discussing just that. Now for organization purposes, I will split this video into 3 parts. In part 1, we'll talk about plans, perspectives or angles, the camera motion, and lighting. In part 2, we'll talk about the field of view, the depth of field, and the image format. In part 3, we'll talk about the exposition, the frame rate, and white balance. If you apply all of these rules to your animation at once, I can guarantee you your animation will look a lot more professional. Even if the moves themselves don't look as professional, but these rules add up to it a lot. Part 1. The first thing I want to talk about is the plans. What are the plans? What is a plan? To simplify, a plan is a certain distance from the camera to the object. We divide the plans into 4 major groups, out of which each one has 3 to 5 plans in it. Now I could go into detail and tell you about the rules of each of every one of these individual plans, but there are just too many, there's just too much stuff to know. So I'm focusing on the 4 major groups. Don't worry, you'll get your visual material on the video as well. I want to explain stuff. First, we have the total plans. We use this group basically to show off the location, to place your animation or a movie in a specific area, so you see where the stuff is happening, what's going on, where they are, to basically to put a story. Or if your character is traveling, you use a total plan to show off the new location. Just place them somewhere so you know where they are. Next up is the medium plans. We use this group to display the actors. What are they doing? Their actions. Basically, that. Next we got close plans. This group of plans is used to display emotion and facial expressions. Someone says something weird, you're like, the reactions, the expressions. And finally, we have the detail plans. Now this group is special because we use it for a very special purpose. It's to display something very important, an important piece of information that your audience cannot miss. In a horror movie, that would be a killer reaching for the knife. Detail plans are usually very short. They last about a second or 2, just for you to see that one bit of information that you cannot miss. It's basically a hand reaching for the knife, then the frame changes again. You just had to see that, so you know he has a knife and shit's going down. Now don't overuse the detail, because if you overuse it, it's not special. You take away its value. Don't overdo it. Next up are the perspectives and angles. We know 4 of them. Or 5 if you count the frog's perspective. This video is being shot with a normal perspective. The camera is in the height of my eyes. This is what it looks like in practice. Then we know the higher perspective, the lower perspective, the bird's view perspective, and the frog's view perspective. The higher perspective makes your character seem small, unimportant, useless. The lower perspective makes your character seem great, powerful, mighty. The bird's view perspective doesn't make your character appear smaller, but it's basically an overall look at the scenery. You can use it to show like an objective point of view. And the frog's perspective makes the audience feel very small and everything around them is big. They feel unimportant and what's going on the screen is very important to them. I mean, not literally, but that's a psychological effect. If you're showing some weird shit up there, they're not gonna feel like that's important. A frog's view can be used to make someone appear very tall and mighty. Then there's of course a special kind of perspective called tilted perspective. Like this, for example. If the camera's sideways, that means something is not okay. The world is in a wrong place and something is not right. You can get an even bigger effect if you tilt the camera while recording. This camera right now is stationary, but if you try to do something like this, the camera is tilting and that makes for a very, very unsettling effect. We'll get to the camera motion later, but I just want to prove my point. Next up, camera motion. Now, I would rarely use a stationary camera if I were you, because a camera with motion attracts the viewer. The viewers feel dragged into it, like they're actually there, because the camera is moving, which creates that effect. Here are some basic camera movements and their psychological effects. First off, we got the pan. We know the horizontal or the vertical one. You can move the camera left or right, or up and down. Now, a pan is actually a great way to reveal parts of your scenery slowly. And if used with a great lighting or soundtrack, it can build anticipation pretty well. It's mostly used in horror films when they slowly reveal what's going on. You are the one who gets to decide what the viewer gets to see, and that is awesome. Next up, we got the tilt. As I already mentioned, is a way to display an imbalanced state. Something is wrong, something is not okay. A stationary camera can achieve the similar effect, but it's better if you move it. The effect is greater that way. Then we have the zoom in and zoom out. That's technically not a camera motion because the camera is stationary, but we'll talk about the field of view later, and that's when I will explain these two. Then we have the moving in and out, which is a different effect where the camera is actually moving closer or further away. If you move the camera closer, you're building up curiosity. You are slowly approaching the scenery. Something is going on. You're curious. You're zooming in. You're moving in. But if you're moving out, it's like slowly moving away from a creepy situation. Moving out, combined with tilt, can make for a great horror movie experience. Then we have the handheld camera and the Steadicam. Now, these two are not an option in animation, because you're the one who moves the camera in the program. But if you were to animate the camera like it's being held by a person, you feel personally attached to the scenery. Feels like you're actually there. You feel personally closer to what's going on screen. A lot of animators use that to their advantage. And finally, we got the crane. Now again, in animation, that doesn't mean much. In the real world, that's basically a crane moving the camera around the scenery. But in animation, we could call that like a dynamic camera, where the camera is all around the place, recording everything, make sure you get all the shots and stuff. The best place to use this is a fight animation, and that's also the reason why Divided 4 is gonna be lit. And finally, lighting. We have the 3-point lighting and the 4-point lighting. I explain what they are, how they work in my video called Animated Part 6. You can click the eye in the corner to go see it now, or wait till the end and get the link in the description below. Now, since it's already explained in that video, I wouldn't dive into it here too much because we don't have much time. So I suggest you go check out that video if you want to learn more, and we can move on to part 2 of the video. And the first thing is field of view. You can either have a wide field of view or a small field of view. Directors on set usually go for the small field of view. They basically zoom in on the camera and move it far back. By that, they achieve the feeling of closeness. They make the motive stand out. There's something important about it. Let's say there's a character on your set. To the viewer, that character would have felt important. Like there's something on his mind, something about this character is very important. Low field of view, move the camera backwards. There's a lot of shots in Hollywood movies recorded that way. It's a good way for you to build your character's character, because to the viewer, that character is important. He's developing, he's thinking, he has something on his mind. He is important for once. A wide field of view doesn't really mean much. The audience doesn't really feel close to the footage, but it's a good way to show a wide area in a closed space. Next up, we got the depth of field. This is pretty self-explanatory. What's focused is important, what's not focused is not. For example, my arm here isn't focused, and you're gonna be focusing on my face, which is focused. Or at least I hope it is. I hope I didn't mess up with the camera again. I bet most of you didn't notice this piano until I brought it up. It's about what's in focus. Then we have the image format. Yes, the image format contributes to the experience as well. The oldest format is 4:3, and that's the ratio between the bottom and the side of the screen. Today we mostly use 16:9, which is equivalent to 1 versus 1.78. It's been standardized that this is the closest ratio to the human eye, and that's what most people use. But some people went to the extremes again, and they created a new format, 1 versus 2.35, and that's called CinemaScope. It looks like this. This is a bit too much, but it makes for a really cool effect if you're in the cinema. If you're interested, you can try to experiment with the formats and see how they suit you. There is no best format, but I suggest you keep within the eye ratio, 16:9, or 1 versus 1.78. Part 3. First, we're gonna talk about the exposition. Exposition is the amount of light that falls on your image sensor. or to simplify, how bright your image is. Now obviously, lighter images feel warmer, happier, and darker images just the opposite. Now I know what you're gonna say, a lot of Hollywood movies are extremely dark. But because they use the lighting right, pay attention to when you see one of these scenes. There will always be like a light outline or something around the character so you know where they are and so you can build the space where they're in for yourself. It's always like this. And if you watched Animated Part 6, which is the lighting part of this video, you would know that. If you can create this outline yourself, then go ahead. You can afford dark scenes. But it's kinda impossible in my animator unless you make the scene brighter. But if you're using Maya, Cinema 4D, Blender, or anything like that, then go ahead, that's wanted. Next up is the frame rate. Now a lot of you want to go for 60 FPS 4K image, but that's just not how you do it. Actually, if you want your animation to feel more cinematic, I suggest you go for 25 frames per second, or maybe 30, because 25 is the standard for movies. In all the movies you've seen, were recorded in 25 frame rates per second. Some of them are 30, but that's the European and American standards fighting each other. I suggest you go for 25 or 30 if you want to achieve cinematic results. And finally, we have the white balance. What is white balance? It's basically the colors on your image. Now, I purposely messed up the white balance on my camera and edited the footage later. This is how unedited footage looks like. This is disgusting! What I'm basically trying to say with white balance is simply keep your colors nice. You can achieve that by lighting or changing the default colors, or in other softwares, just that. If you somehow fail to create nice colors in the program, I suggest you fix it later in post-production, like in some editing software, like what I'm doing with my camera. What is going on? One more thing I didn't mention talking about is composition. This is now the most important thing of the day, the crown jewel of the video. If you ever studied photography, you would know that the composition is more important than the quality. You can shoot with a professional camera or with a phone, but if the phone has a better composition, then the phone's image is gonna look prettier. What is a composition? The composition is the placement of the elements on your photo. You may have heard of the Fibonacci spiral or the rule by thirds. Basically that. It's really hard to explain that, but imagine your image split into thirds, or split them by the Fibonacci ratio, which is close to thirds. This is a visual representation of the both. Then what you want to do is you want to position the elements to be placed on the grid. Now it's hard to explain without visual material, so have a bunch of images here so you know what I mean, and this is basically what I want to say here. This is very important, because if the placement is well, the image automatically looks nicer, and therefore the animation is much more appealing. Now you heard a lot of knowledge today, but if you're only going to apply a few of these, it's not gonna be much of a difference. But applying all these rules to your video at once will make it absolutely flawless. You can call me clickbait, you can call me fake, but this is honestly the most important thing you will ever learn about animation, filmmaking, and photography. Next time you watch your favorite Disney cartoon or your favorite movie, keep track of the camera language. You will see there's a lot of these rules everywhere. This is as professional as it gets. I could go explaining even deeper, but I mostly explained everything that is usable in animation. Thank you guys for watching, I hope you learned a thing or two. Maybe subscribe to the channel or something if you think this was useful, and stay sharp!